Hi, I'm Shem, a self-taught digital artist, and it's taken me almost 6 years to take my art from this to this. But if I follow the 5 tips that I'm going to share with you in this video, then I probably would have improved a lot quicker. So knowing what I know now, here are 5 lessons that I would tell my younger self if I were to start digital painting from scratch. 1. Choosing a direction. Back in 2021, I came across a video by Sam Arts, and I was completely blown away by what he was able to create in such a short amount of time just by using digital painting programs. Before that, my experience with art was limited to just using pencils to draw Disney princesses and the occasional family portrait every now and then. I didn't really use color because I didn't know how to, so I just avoided it. But then I saw him build this beautiful painting from scratch, and that suddenly I had to know how to do it for myself. That was the moment I decided to learn digital painting. At first, my goal was simple. I wanted to paint like him. That was it. So I bought one of the cheapest digital art tablets I could find and just started experimenting. I painted from reference, painted from imagination, tried different things, and honestly, I was mostly just having fun. Eventually, I realized I didn't actually know much about art. So I started taking online beginner classes in order to improve, and over time, my goal changed. It went from wanting to paint like him to wanting to get better at digital painting, to painting from imagination, and eventually to become a professional artist focused in visual storytelling and color and light design. And this is why I think you need to ask yourself a very important question. Why do you want to learn digital painting? Is it just something you want to do for fun, or is it something you want to pursue professionally? Because your answer changes how seriously you need to approach learning. If it's a hobby, you have more freedom to explore and experiment and just enjoy the process. But if you want to do it professionally, you need a clearer learning path. Art is hard and art is vast. There's so much you can learn, and if you're teaching yourself, it's very easy to get lost in all the countless online tutorials without knowing if you're actually improving. That's why you need to choose a direction and decide what growth looks like for you. Do you want to be a character designer, concept artist, illustrator, prop designer, environment artist? Each path has different skills you need to focus on. For example, a character designer may need to study anatomy, gesture, shape design, and costume, while an environment designer would need to focus more on perspective, landscapes, composition, and color and light. So instead of trying to learn everything at once, look at the artists who are already doing the work that you want to do. Study their portfolios and pay attention to the skills that their work relies on. Then work backwards and try to figure out the fundamentals that you need to practice. And if you don't have a specific goal in mind, that's fine too. Give yourself time to experiment and try different styles and study different artists and see what actually interests you. But I would still recommend setting a deadline for yourself. At some point, you need to choose a direction. Even if it's not perfect, you can always change paths later. But making a decision will give you clarity and something to focus on. So figure out why you want to learn digital painting, what you want to achieve, and what skills will help you get there. From there, you can start building a learning path that actually makes sense for your goal. And that takes us into the next point. Stop trying to learn everything at once. When I was beginning, one of the biggest mistakes I made was trying to learn everything at once. I would jump between different fundamentals within the same day. Anatomy, lighting, composition, and whatever else I felt behind on. And because I kept switching focus, I never gave my brain enough time to sit with one thing and process it. After a while, it just became frustrating because it felt like I was working my butt off, but I wasn't improving in anything. That was when I realized I needed to stop trying to learn everything at once and narrow my focus down to one fundamental at a time. At first, that was difficult because focusing on one topic made me feel like I was falling behind on everything else. And with art, that fear kind of makes sense because all the fundamentals work together to create one image. So I made a compromise. I started studying in 3-day blocks within 9-day cycles. 3 days felt long enough to focus on one topic, but short enough that I didn't feel like I was neglecting everything else. I would spend 3 days on value, 3 days on color and light, and 3 days on something else. Once the 9 days were finished, I would start the cycle again. It was not a strict system either. If I felt like I was behind on a topic or needed more time on a fundamental, I would just add an extra day and extend the cycle. That flexibility made it easier for me to stay consistent, and for the first time, I actually saw improvement. So one of my biggest tips to my younger self would be, please stop trying to learn everything at once. Give your mind time to focus give the information time to sink in, and once you know which fundamentals matter more to achieve the goal or career path that you want, spend dedicated blocks of time on each one. It doesn't have to be 3 days. It can be a week, a month, a year, whatever works for you. The important thing is to stay with it long enough to actually learn from it. And honestly, this is still something I struggle with. There's always this pressure to improve quickly, especially when you see all these other amazing artists online. It can feel like you need to hurry and catch up and get better at everything. But you have to remember that trying to learn everything at once usually hurts your growth more than improving it. Now for the next point. Knowledge versus skill. So when I decided to focus and learn one fundamental at a time, how I approached it was to spend hours watching tutorials, taking notes, studying notes, and convincing myself I was being productive. But I was barely making art. Part of it was because I knew I'd be bad at it. And so I procrastinated by telling myself it was a knowledge gap. I would think I just need to understand this topic better before I actually try and do it for myself. But in hindsight, the problem wasn't a knowledge gap. A lot of the times it was a skill gap. But instead of practicing how to apply the knowledge like I should have, I stayed in my comfort zone and continued to watch more lessons, take notes, and just avoid doing art because I was afraid of being bad at it. It took me a while to realize that understanding something in a tutorial does not mean you actually know how to apply the concept in the real world. You can watch someone explain value and lighting and anatomy and think, okay, that makes sense. But the real test is whether or not you can use it in your own work. The biggest hurdle I had to move past was to just accept I would be bad at it at first. I had to make awkward and cringy art and make mistakes before I saw any form of improvement. The more I avoided making bad art, the longer I delayed the practice that would actually help me improve. So I would really recommend not hiding behind the safety of watching countless tutorials. At some point, you have to put the skill into practice. A personal rule I like is a 1-to-4 ratio. For every 1 hour you spend watching a class, spend around 4 hours practicing what you learned. Because after a while, the information starts to repeat itself. The core principles of art don't really change. Art will always be about contrast versus harmony. Value design will always be crucial to the composition. And color temperature is always about the balance between warms versus cools. But the ways you can apply these principles are endless. And that's where growth actually happens. Not just in knowing the fundamentals, but in learning how to use it in different ways. And over time, the way you apply these fundamentals is what develops your style as an artist. Now on to number 4, painting with a system. As I got better at studying the fundamentals individually, I eventually wanted to start applying them to my paintings. But even though I knew how to apply each fundamental on its own, I didn't really know how to bring them together. Because any finished painting is a combination of all the fundamentals working together at the same time. Value, shape, form, perspective, color, light, edges, gesture, composition, anatomy, storytelling. And the difficult part is that every single decision you make will affect more than one fundamental at once. For example, let's look at this simple painting from before. Say I wanted to add more hair ornaments, and without thinking much, I placed this gold circle here because it looks kind of blank and I wanted to add some color variety. My goal may have been to add more color interest, but in doing that, I've also changed the value design, added more edge contrast by making it just hard edges, flattened the form and the perspective of the hair by making the ornament a flat 2D shape, and I messed with the gestural pattern in the hair. And honestly, this realization felt paralyzing because one painting suddenly became an endless number of decisions and possibilities, and I just couldn't wrap my head around how to manage all of it at the same time. I used to start with a simple line sketch and then jump straight into painting. But most of the time, I could never get the final image to look cohesive because I was trying to solve too many problems at once. I would fix the value over here, the colors over there, the perspective somewhere else, and everything just turned into a hot mess. That was when I realized I needed a system. I needed to approach my painting in stages so I could solve one major problem at a time rather than trying to fix everything all at once. My system has changed over the years, but this is the one I currently use. I usually start with a simple value composition where I experiment with different angles, moods, shapes, and value ranges or levels of value contrast. At this stage, I'm just trying to work out an interesting abstract composition while making sure the subject matter reads clearly. And then based on that value sketch, I create a rough layout, estimating the perspective. This helps me figure out where individual elements will go in the scene and how they relate to each other in space. After that, I focus on color design and create a rough color comp. At this stage, I allow myself to make color decisions without worrying too much about whether every color has context yet. For example, if I want to place some green here, even though I have not drawn any tree or anything, that's fine. I'm just solving the color problem on its own without worrying too much about context. Then in the next stage, I go back into the layout and tighten the forms and the perspective and design. This is where I start giving context to some of the color decisions I made earlier. Once that second layout is working, I use the color comp as a guide and take it into the final painting stage, focusing more on shape design, edge control, form, and finish. Now I understand not everyone wants to paint in such a structured way, and you definitely don't have to follow my system. A process like this can take away some of the spontaneity and expressive nature of painting. And granted, I don't use the system for every painting I make. But in the beginning, when you're still learning how to juggle all the fundamentals at once, having a system can help make the process feel a lot less overwhelming. As you gain more experience and become more confident in your decision making, you may not need to rely on the system so much. Even now, I mostly use it for more complicated paintings, where there are a lot of elements that need to work together. For simpler paintings, I might just start with a loose sketch, jump into color, and just figure out the rest as I go. So the system can change depending on the requirements of the painting and the preferences of the artist. But I do strongly recommend having some kind of system in place, especially when you're starting out. Break the painting down into stages and solve one major problem at a time. That way you're not overwhelming yourself by trying to solve all the fundamentals at once. On to our final point. Don't copy, decode. Even though I kept painting using my system and focused on practicing my fundamentals, I still felt there was a huge gap between my current skill level and the art I wanted to make. The artist I admired felt so far out of reach that no matter how much I practiced, it seemed like I would never get that good. But eventually I realized I was studying in a vacuum, which is a side effect of being self-taught. I was trying to figure everything out on my own. What made a composition look good, why did a certain color palette work, how to design shapes, how to create mood, how to make a painting feel finished. I mean, yes, I was learning theory from online classes, but applying those ideas in my own work was a completely different thing. Then it occurred to me that the artists I admired were not just making beautiful paintings, but they were already using the fundamentals in the ways that I was trying to understand. I looked at their work all the time, but I was only admiring the final result. I wasn't studying how they used the value, how they used the color, shape, and composition in order to make their image work. The idea was simple. If I wanted to make good paintings, I had to study good paintings. That was when I started doing master studies. Instead of only looking at finished artwork and thinking, oh wow, this looks amazing, and moving on, I started breaking them down and analyzing what makes it look good. Why did it work? I would focus on one fundamental at a time. Sometimes I would study the value compositions. Other times I would make quick color comps to understand the color choices they made. I would also do drawing studies to break down how they use flow, gesture, and shape design. This helped me see more possibilities in how the fundamentals could be applied, and also helped me understand the difference between something that just looks acceptable and something that feels intentional and designed. And I think doing master studies is a really important part of finding your own style. A lot of people are afraid of studying from other artists because you don't want to copy or steal their style. But the goal of a master study is not to copy someone's art and pretend it's yours. The goal is to understand what decisions or choices they made, why those choices worked, and how you can apply the reasoning behind their decisions in your own work. There's a quote often attributed to Picasso: good artists copy, great artists steal. There's also a saying, what is originality but undetected plagiarism? These quotes aren't permission for you to copy or plagiarize, but to serve as a reminder that no artist creates in complete isolation. Any one person's art style is a combination of all the different things they like from all the different artists they admire. How you combine these elements with your own ideas and filter them through your voice and culture is what will make your style unique. If you want to read more about this idea, I would recommend Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon. This book revolves around the idea that creativity is built from influences, ideas, and experiences that already exist, and it's up to us to draw from them and combine them with our own taste. So don't be afraid to study from the masters. Study good paintings to train your eye. Break them down to understand what makes them work. Take the lessons you learn, not the entire style. If you like this video and are ready to properly start your digital painting journey, then let me help you start off by explaining the most important art fundamental ever in just 5 minutes.